Hey guys, it's Shara from Cutout Diaries, and today I'm going to show you how you can give back to your local community by building a blessing box. So if you're ready to get building, let's go. You've probably seen these boxes pop up a lot recently in local communities. Sometimes they're called little libraries where people can share and trade books, and sometimes they're used for food donations for those in need. There are lots of ways to use them to give back to a community, but a friend of mine is actually using this one as a blessing box for new mothers, stocking it full of diapers, baby food, formula, and other newborn and baby supplies. As an ultrasound tech and new business owner catering to new and soon-to-be mothers, this was something that she felt like she could post up beside her studio, allowing the community to help keep it stocked and place items inside. Obviously, you can get super creative as to how you want to use this project in your community, but as always, I'm just here to show you how to put it together. After that, its purpose is up to you. So if you're ready to get building and giving back to your local community, here we go. I made this box simple, using only a single sheet of 1/2-inch exterior plywood, a treated 4x4 post, and a few cedar boards for the door and the roof. I've got the dimensions, details, and cut list in the plans linked below, but I'll cover assembly and some of the helpful cutting tips in this video. The first thing I did was cut 2 strips from my plywood sheet, one 16.5-inch wide and the other 23.5-inch wide. I set the leftover strip off to the side for now. I will use it later. The 16.5-inch wide strip will be used to make the sides and the bottom of the box. The wider piece will be used for the front, back, and roof. For now, I'm focusing on the sides and the bottom, so I set up my 16.5-inch wide strip on some scrap blocks to cut them down. The top edge of the side pieces needed to be beveled the same angle as the roof pitch. I made this 30 degrees. I set my circular saw's bevel angle at 30 degrees, and then I set up a straight edge to run it along to cut this piece. Now normally I would use my Craig AccuCut for something like this, but it's hard to do with a bevel angle, so that's why I'm just using a straight edge here instead. Now at this point I had one side piece with a square bottom and a 30-degree bevel top. So I used this piece to mark where to cut the second piece the same size. Since the ends are both beveled 30 degrees on this edge, I cut the line square to use as the bottom edge. Then I just cut a simple bottom panel and sanded everything smooth. I kept assembly pretty simple here, using only wood glue and screws. I attached the side panels to the bottom using wood glue and 1¼ inch exterior wood screws. It's important here to make sure that your beveled tops are both slanting towards the outside, and to make sure to pre-drill, as all this plywood is really thin, it will split pretty easy if you don't. As a side note, you could definitely use 3/4 inch plywood for this instead of the 1/2 inch that I'm using, but I was trying to find a happy medium between it being super heavy and super sturdy. So you don't want the box to be too top heavy for this. I opted for a 1/2 inch. If you have doubts, you can definitely use 3/4 inch if you prefer. Once the sides and bottom were together, the next step was the front and back pieces. So I pulled my 23.5-inch wide plywood strip back out and cut 2 pieces slightly taller than the back panel needed to be. I dry fit this piece in place with the sides and the bottom and marked where the roof line ended at the top of the side panels. Then I found the center of the back and marked it. I knew that the pitch was 30 degrees, so I used my speed square to mark a 30-degree line, and then I used a straight edge to extend this line to the center line that I just drew. Then I could cut along these lines to give me my back piece. I glued and screwed this piece into the back side of the box, making sure to pre-drill for each screw. I did the corners first and then put several screws down the side, and then I flipped it over and realized that I forgot to put any in the bottom. Oh, I didn't put any in the bottom. Hello. So I went back and I did that. You might also notice here that somehow my board had about a 3/16 of an inch overhang along the bottom. I'm not sure what happened there, but I wasn't a fan of it, so I trimmed it off before moving on. This is not the best option, but whatever. Flips, flips. Now that the back was in place, I traced it onto the front piece and cut the corners the same way. Now, obviously, the front piece also needs a cutout for the door. You can make this door any size that you want, and I just played around with the sizing, just kind of sketching it out on the board until I thought that the proportions looked right. The main thing is just sketching your lines so that your final door is square. Once I liked where my lines were and the size of the opening here, I just used a drill on each corner to give me a hole to start my jigsaw blade. And then I proceeded to cut as straight as possible along these lines using my jigsaw. I glued and screwed this piece onto the front. I'll trim this out a little more later, but for now I moved on to the roof. I cut 2 pieces from the remaining plywood strip to serve as the roof. And just like the side panels, the top edges of these roof pieces needed to be beveled at 30 degrees. So once again, I beveled my circular saw at 30 degrees and used a straight edge clamp to the piece as a guide. I attempted to kind of glue up the top pieces using tape as a clamp for this, but it really didn't work out very well. It wasn't really a big deal. I just centered these boards onto the box and screwed them together and screwed them in place. Once the roof was on, I moved on to trimming out the door. I grabbed the leftover plywood strip from the very beginning of the project and cut off a piece of it to rip into smaller sections. I ripped 4 1.5 inch wide strips of this piece to frame out the door. I just cut to fit these pieces around the door opening and glued them in place. While the glue was drying around the frame, I caulked every crack of this box. Since this will be out in the elements, I wanted to cover everything really well, especially the top of the roof. It was a little challenging to get all of the little cracks and crevices on the inside of the box, but I think I got everything eventually. I covered every crack on the in and the outside of the box just to help prevent any leaks. And once the glue and the caulk was dry, I started painting. I gave the box a couple of coats of primer and then a couple coats of exterior paint. Now all that's left is the door, the roof, and the post. So let's take care of the door first. I made this door from 1x3 cedar boards, and I just cut the pieces to allow for an 1/8 of an inch gap on all sides in the opening and assembled this frame using wood glue and dowels. I had my local glass place cut me a piece of plexiglass to fit over the door frame opening, and I pre-drilled holes in the corners. Then I used some clear Gorilla Glue to help seal the edges and secure the plexiglass. I used 5/8" wood screws on the pre-drilled holes as well. And by the way, if you don't have a local glass place, the big box stores and many building supply stores can usually custom cut you a piece. I set the door aside for now and installed the roof slats. These are optional. I thought that they looked cute and added slightly more protection, but I really wish that I hadn't turned the tongue and groove cedar horizontally. I had already cut the pieces before I realized that I probably shouldn't have done it this way, and it's fine as is. It's mostly just for decoration, but it might have provided better protection if I had turned it the other way. This stuff was pricey though, and since I had already cut it, I left it, but I would recommend running them vertically instead. Because of the 30-degree bevel roof line, these boards didn't fit very well together at the top. To help give it a little bit better fit, I trimmed the bottom piece of the groove on the top two roof boards. That way one can slightly overlap the other for a better fit. Then I cut the rest of the boards and dry fit them onto the roof. Each piece overlaps the one below it, so the bottom piece needed to be placed first. So I marked where to trim the bottom piece on each side and ripped this down on the table saw. Then I could glue and clamp this piece in place and screw in the ones above it. I found it best to drive these screws at a slight angle so that they would go through both boards at each joint and then secure them both to the rooftop. Again, if I had to do this over, I would use the tongue and groove turned the other way, but it is what it is. I screwed in the roof slats on each side of the roof at both the front and the back, and then I gave both the roof slats and the cedar door frame a couple coats of exterior poly. I also caulked the roof line with clear caulk after the poly dried, just to protect it a little bit more from any potential leaks. At this point, I realized that I had forgot to add a shelf, and I meant to do that before this point, but thankfully it wasn't too late, just a little cramped. So I screwed 2 blocks into the sides and placed a piece of leftover plywood across them just to give me a shelf. You could also screw this shelf in place using screws from the outside through the sides and into the shelf, but I was afraid that I wouldn't get the screws lined up very well, so that's why I just used these scrap blocks screwed into the sides to rest the shelf on. Now the last part was just adding the post. I cut this post 5 foot long. It should go 2 foot in the ground, so then the box will be about 3 foot off the ground. I glued and screwed this post into the center of the box. By the way, scrap blocks helped tremendously with this heavy post in this step. I clamped the post to the workbench once the box was screwed on top, and then I added 2 braces on each side. I just mitered these corners 45 degrees and used wood glue and several screws to secure them to both the bottom of the box and to the post. Then I attached the door using a pair of simple butt hinges and a small latch to keep the door shut when it's not in use. And all that was left at this point was putting it in the ground. Luckily, I didn't have to do any of the digging. My friend and her husband picked it up and installed it 2 foot down with a little concrete mix in the hole, and now it's fully stocked and ready for use. I've made the plans for this project as easy as possible to follow, and I've posted them in the link below if you would like to build one yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope it's inspired you to create something that gives a little bit something back. If you aren't already subscribed to my channel, I would also love it if you'd give me a follow, and until next time, friends, happy building.